At this time, we will begin our news conference regarding the Family Council Action Committee lawsuit that went before the Arkansas Supreme Court challenging Act 1151 of 2005. And as you recall, that particular piece of legislation provided for local option elections in Garland County and in Crittenden County regarding the expansion of casino-type gambling at Oaklawn and Southland. And so the Family Council Action Committee brought a lawsuit before the Arkansas Supreme Court that challenged what we believed was an unauthorized delegation of legislative authority that resulted in the disenfranchisement of voters who lived outside the city limits of Hot Springs and West Memphis. And so that case went before the Arkansas Supreme Court, and they ruled 6-1 against us today, and we are very disappointed in the ruling of the court. We respect the court and the difficult job that they have in ruling on these cases, but nevertheless, we believe that our arguments still have merit, and we believe that that what they're doing in Hot Springs and West Memphis is really outside the bounds of the law. And so what we're here today to do is to, first of all, thank the many individuals around the state of Arkansas who contributed money toward this particular lawsuit to help finance it, and to those who offered other kinds of just moral encouragement in our effort against the expansion of gambling in Hot Springs and West Memphis. Also, I can't say enough good things about our staff attorney, Martha Adcock, who went before the Arkansas Supreme Court, argued our case admirably against an entire team of lawyers that had been hired by Oaklawn and Southland to oppose our effort. And so she did a splendid job, and we have absolutely nothing to be ashamed of in the type of arguments that we put forth and the way that this whole thing was conducted. Now, I want to say at the beginning, if the gambling interest in Hot Springs and West Memphis believe that this fight is over, then they need to think again, because it's not over, and we're going to continue pursuing 3 separate avenues of action against this unauthorized and illegal expansion of gambling in Hot Springs and West Memphis. The first area that we're going to look at is going back to the Arkansas legislature and asking them to fix this problem. Because after all, the legislature created this problem with the passage of Act 1151. They are the ones who created special legislation favoring 2 business interests over everyone else in the state. And we believe that the 14th Amendment to the Arkansas Constitution expressly forbids special legislation that favors one business interest over another. And that's exactly what this legislation did, that empowered Oaklawn and Southland to begin operating casino-type gambling at their establishments. In fact, in his dissent, Justice Gibson agreed with us in that. He said, this is special legislation that the 14th Amendment to the Arkansas Constitution forbids. And he even, in a footnote, if you noticed in that dissenting opinion on page 8, said, what's next? Are we going to have just full-blown casino gambling at the whims of the legislature? And are the people of Arkansas not going to be ever allowed to vote on this, as they have in the past, and as they have rejected casinos in the past? So we're going to take this back to the Arkansas legislature and ask them to fix the problem. At a minimum, the legislature ought to provide a way for the voters of Hot Springs and West Memphis to undo what they did in these elections that authorized these so-called games of skill to begin with. There is no provision in Act 1151 for the voters to repeal their vote. And so it's a one-way street. Once it's enacted, then they are unable legally to do anything about it. The voters have no say in the matter in undoing it. And we think the legislature, at a minimum, ought to give the voters the right to undo this. Because in Garland County, in Hot Springs, when the vote was taken there, the margin of victory for Oaklawn was only 80-something votes. And so it's razor thin in Garland County. The second area that we're going to look at is the possibility of another lawsuit. Now, this is a very expensive proposition, but we've been encouraged by numerous people to just go out here and challenge the legality of these so-called games of skill straight up. Just challenge it and say what they're doing there violates the law. It's gambling, and it's illegal under Arkansas law. And that's another option for us to look at, is to say, hey, why is it that video poker is gambling everywhere in the United States except at Oaklawn and Southland? Why is it that video poker is a game of skill in Arkansas but not anywhere else in the nation? And so we are looking at the possibility, at least, of another lawsuit that would challenge this. The third area that we're going to look at is working with local citizens in Hot Springs and in West Memphis to encourage law enforcement to step up and enforce the law. It's interesting that this type of gambling was removed from Hot Springs back in the 1960s when they had slot machines and open gambling in Hot Springs, and law enforcement came in and said, enough already, we're going to put a stop to this, it's illegal. Well, those same laws are still on the books here in Arkansas, and so what we're going to do is we're going to ask local law enforcement, working with local citizens in those communities, to step up and enforce the law, because this type of gambling is illegal under Arkansas law, and I believe law enforcement would be on very solid ground to step up and simply enforce the law. So those three areas. Number one, work with the legislature. Number two, we're looking at the possibility of another lawsuit to challenge the legality of these so-called games of skill. And number three, working with local law enforcement. And so really this concludes the formal part of our news conference today. I appreciate each of you coming and being here. We wanted to try to get everybody together at one time so that we didn't have to do interviews all day long, and so I appreciate you helping us out in that way. And I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have, but this concludes the formal part of our news conference.